The battlefield was covered in fire and smoke. The war between humans and the Valkora had lasted for months, leaving planets broken and skies filled with burning ships. Among the ruins of one destroyed base stood a single human soldier, Ethan Ward, his armor cracked, his arm bleeding, and his spirit barely holding on. He had crashed far from his unit, deep inside enemy territory. The air was thick with dust and the sound of distant thunder from falling debris. Every breath he took hurt, but he refused to fall. Through the mist, he saw shadows moving, tall, powerful figures in dark silver armor. The Valkora, known across the galaxy as warrior women from the Crimson Nebula, were approaching. They were almost mythical in human tales, ruthless, proud, and beautiful in a way that terrified most. Each step they took echoed like thunder, and their glowing spears hummed with deadly energy. Ethan knew he was surrounded. There was no escape. Their leader stepped forward. She was taller than him by a head, her armor shining faintly with a red hue under the burning sky. Her face, though partly hidden under her war mask, was calm, unreadable, and sharp as a blade. She moved with grace, every gesture showing discipline and strength. Her name, though Ethan didn't know it yet, was Commander Sira Velm, leader of the 7th Legion. She stopped a few feet away from him. Her glowing spear rested at her side, though her body language was still tense, ready to strike. Her voice was firm, low, and heavy with command. "Human soldier," she said, her accent strange but clear. "You have crossed into Valkora ground. You fought bravely, but your war ends here." Ethan looked up, breathing hard. He expected to die, maybe with a final insult on his lips. But something inside him, maybe the exhaustion or the strange calm that came when death was near, made him see her differently. Her eyes glowed faintly under the mask, not cruel, not empty, but alive. There was something fierce and noble in them. And despite the danger, he felt something stir in his heart, a strange admiration. He tried to speak, his voice dry. He hesitated, then whispered softly, "You're beautiful." For a second, no one moved. The entire group of Valkora warriors froze as if time had stopped. The silence was thick, filled only by the crackle of fire and the wind moving across the broken battlefield. They looked at each other, confused, shocked. No human, no alien, no one in the galaxy had ever spoken that word to a Valkora. Commander Sira's eyes widened behind her mask. She stepped closer slowly, her spear humming louder. "What did you say?" she asked in disbelief. Ethan blinked, surprised by his own courage. "I said you're beautiful." Her expression hardened, her voice colder. "Do you mock me, human? Do you wish to die with a lie on your lips?" He shook his head quickly. "No, I mean it. You're strong, fearless, and proud. Where I come from, that's what beauty looks like." The Valkora warriors exchanged uneasy glances. They did not understand. On their world, beauty was not praise, it was weakness. They honored scars, power, and victory. The idea of being called beautiful felt strange, almost insulting. Commander Sira stared at him, her thoughts spinning. No one had ever dared to say something like that. She didn't know if it was bravery or madness. The human was small, fragile, and clearly near death, but his eyes held no fear, only honesty. "Humans are strange," she muttered. "You speak of beauty in the face of death." Ethan gave a weak smile. "Maybe death helps us see it clearer." Her grip on the spear loosened slightly. She studied him for another long moment. Something in her chest felt different. A word she had never known carried warmth. The other warriors waited for the order to strike, but it never came. Sira finally said, "You are foolish. And yet I cannot kill you." Ethan lowered his hand slowly, breathing in disbelief. He didn't understand why, but he felt that something had changed between them, something fragile but real. Sira turned away, her voice calm again. "Take him to the fortress," she ordered. "He is our prisoner." As they led Ethan through the burning ruins toward the cliffs of Varen Prime, he looked back at the battlefield glowing under the dying sun. He thought of her, of that strange moment when death and beauty met in the same breath. And far behind him, Commander Sira touched her chest lightly, where her heart beat faster than usual. She whispered the human word under her breath, uncertain of its meaning but feeling its weight. Beautiful. For the first time in her life, the word didn't sound weak. It sounded alive. The fortress of the Valkora stood high in the cliffs of Varen Prime, built from black stone that shimmered faintly in the crimson light of their twin suns. It was not a place for comfort, it was a place for strength. Every hall echoed with the sound of armor, the rhythm of training, and the whispers of command. When Ethan Ward was brought inside, every warrior turned to stare. No human had ever been taken alive before. Some looked curious. Most looked angry. To them, humans were fragile creatures who fought with machines instead of honor. Yet their commander had spared one. That alone was enough to spread confusion across the fortress. They placed Ethan in a small chamber carved into the rock, not chained, but watched. A single lamp glowed above him, casting soft light on his face. He was exhausted but alive. When he touched his chest, he could still feel the thumping of his heart, proof that something greater than luck had saved him. Outside his cell, Commander Sira Veln stood in silence. She was known for being cold, unshakable, and always certain in her decisions. But that day she was not certain at all. The word kept echoing in her mind. Beautiful. It felt strange, unfamiliar, dangerous. On her planet, beauty was weakness. The Valkora believed only in power. The most honored warriors were those covered in scars, their strength written on their skin. No one had ever dared to call her or any of her kind beautiful. She entered the room quietly. Ethan sat on a bench looking tired but calm. When he saw her, he stood up slowly, his hand pressing against his injured side. "You're alive," she said simply. "Yeah," he replied, smiling faintly. "Thanks to you." She tilted her head, confused again by his tone. "You should not thank your enemy." "Maybe," he said softly. "But you didn't kill me. That makes you something more than just an enemy." Sira folded her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Why did you say that word? Do you think it will save you?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I said it because it was true." Her voice hardened. "You call strength and scars beautiful?" He nodded. "Yes. Where I come from, beauty isn't just about looking soft or perfect. It's about something deeper. You stand in fire and don't fall. You protect your people. You fight for what matters. That's beauty to me." Sira stared at him, trying to find the lie, but his face showed nothing but honesty. He was tired, hurt, and still spoke with courage. That kind of truth was rare, even among warriors. "Humans," she whispered. "You are strange creatures. You use weak words to describe strong things." Ethan smiled. "Maybe that's why we survive. We see hope even in broken things." She didn't answer. She turned to leave, but before she stepped out, she asked quietly, "Why did you not beg for your life?" He looked down for a moment, then said, "Because if I die, at least I'll die saying something real." Those words stayed with her long after she left the room. That night, Sira stood alone on the fortress balcony, watching the twin moons rise over the mountains. The wind was cold, carrying the scent of metal and dust. Below her, the training fields glowed faintly from the fires of the night drills. Her second-in-command, Talra, approached silently. "Commander," she said, "why do you keep the human alive? He is weak. He will not survive the next storm." Sira's eyes didn't move from the horizon. "He said something I do not understand." "Until I do, he lives," Talra frowned. "He called you beautiful." "That is an insult." Sira finally turned to her. "Perhaps to us, but not to him." Talra said nothing more. She bowed and left. When Sira was alone again, she whispered the human word once more, letting it roll off her tongue slowly. "Beautiful." The sound of it made her chest ache. Not with pain, but with something she could not name. Down in the chamber, Ethan lay awake. His body ached, but his thoughts were full of her, the way her eyes burned with strength, the way her voice shook the air. He didn't know why he had said it, only that it had come from a place deep inside him. Somewhere between fear and admiration, something new was forming. Not love yet, not even friendship, just understanding. A fragile thread that connected two beings from different worlds. And though the fortress slept under the twin moons, both the human and the alien warrior found themselves awake, thinking of the same strange word that had stopped a battlefield in silence. The next morning, the fortress was alive with the sound of drills and clashing weapons. The Valkora warriors moved like shadows, their spears slicing through the air with perfect rhythm. Ethan watched from his small chamber as they trained. Every movement was precise, every strike powerful, and every stance full of purpose. He had never seen warriors like this. They were terrifying, unstoppable, yet there was an elegance in their strength. He had expected fear, hatred, maybe even silence from them, but instead he felt curiosity. Slowly, the other warriors began noticing him. The human who survived a battlefield alone, who had looked at their commander and spoken a word no one else dared. Commander Sira Veln entered the chamber while Ethan was trying to clean the wounds on his arm. She did not sit, did not smile, but her eyes studied him with intensity. There was a questio in there, one that could not be spoken aloud yet. "Why do you persist?" she asked finally, her voice calm but firm. Ethan looked up. "Persist? You survive when most humans would fall. You speak when most would be silent. You look at me and speak. Strange words, why?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because giving up is easy. Saying lies is easy. I've never been good at easy." Sira's gaze lingered. She did not understand why the words felt so truthful. Humans, in her experience, were weak and fragile, built to hide behind machines and clever tricks. But this human, he was different. Over the next days, Ethan began helping where he could. He repaired damaged machinery in the fortress, fetched supplies, and listened to the younger warriors' stories of battle. They told him of victories and losses, of scars won and friends lost. He listened without judgment, with care in his eyes, and soon they began trusting him. Not as a human, not as an enemy, but as something. However, one evening, Sira approached him quietly while the twin moons cast silver light across the stone hall. Ethan was cleaning a blade, his hands careful, precise. "Do your people always speak of beauty in such ways?" she asked. Ethan paused, thinking. "No," he said finally. "Most people only call what they see beautiful, but I see beauty in courage, in heart, in the will to keep going even when the world is broken. That's what I see in you, in all of you." Sira's face remained guarded, but something in her chest shifted. For the first time in her life, someone outside her kind had seen her not just as a weapon, but as more, something worth admiring, something worth protecting. "I do not understand humans," she whispered, almost to herself. "You do not need to," Ethan said softly. "You only need to see what is true." For the first time, she considered the idea that truth could come wrapped in kindness, even from a human. That night, Sira stood alone on the balcony, her silver hair catching the wind, and stared at the distant mountains. The word echoed in her mind again, beautiful. It was not a weakness, not a lie, it was a recognition. A human had seen the heart beneath her armor, the courage behind every battle, and had named it. The fortress slept, but Sira could not. She thought of Ethan, small and fragile, yet fearless. She thought of his strange words and quiet strength. She thought of the way his presence seemed to remind the Valcora warriors of something long forgotten, the light beyond victory and scars. Inside his chamber, Ethan looked up at the ceiling, imagining his home on Earth, the oceans, the music, the warmth of people he loved. Yet he did not feel lonely. Here, among warriors, he felt a connection he had never known. Not love, not yet, but a thread of understanding, fragile and delicate, stretching across worlds and species. And somewhere deep in the fortress, Sira wondered if humans could teach her something she had never learned. For the first time, she wondered if being called beautiful was not a weakness, but a gift she would never forget. The night passed slowly, carrying with it the quiet hum of the fortress and the distant stars of Varen Prime. And with every passing hour, the bond between human and alien, fragile yet unspoken, grew stronger, stretching silently across the chasm of difference and distrust, preparing them for the storms yet to come. Days passed slowly in the fortress of Varen Prime. Ethan was no longer a stranger to the Valcora. He moved among them quietly, never claiming to belong, yet always present. At first, the younger warriors whispered behind his back, questioning why a human lived among them. But slowly, through small acts of courage and kindness, he earned their attention. He helped repair damaged weapons after training sessions, carried supplies through the winding halls of the fortress, and listened patiently when the young warriors shared their stories. He never judged, never boasted, never made fun. In return, they began to see him not as a fragile enemy, but as something different. Someone brave, someone persistent, someone human. Commander Sira watched silently from a distance. She was still cold, still disciplined, still the perfect warrior leader. Yet the strange human had left a mark on her she could not understand. His words, the ones she repeated quietly at night, beautiful, haunted her mind. That word was not weakness. It was truth. A mirror showing her what she could not see in herself. One evening, the twin moons rose, casting a soft silver glow over the fortress walls. Sira found Ethan alone, sitting on the edge of the cliff staring at the stars. The wind ruffled his hair and the edges of his torn uniform, yet he looked calm. Strong even. "Do your people always see beauty in everything?" she asked, stepping closer. Her voice was quiet, almost unsure. Ethan looked up and smiled softly. "No," he said. "Most people see beauty only in things that are easy to admire. Flowers, sunsets, music. But I see it in courage, in persistence, in the heart that refuses to give up even when everything is broken. I see it in you." Sira's eyes widened slightly. She did not move, did not speak. The words felt strange, heavy, and warm all at once. She had trained her whole life to be strong, to hide emotion, to survive. And yet this human had seen her truth, not the armor, not the title, not the victories, but her courage. "You speak strangely," she said finally. "Humans are foolish, often weak." "Maybe," Ethan said softly. "But sometimes we see the world differently. Sometimes that difference can matter." For a long moment they just stared at the sky. The fortress seemed to fall silent around them, as if the stars themselves were listening. In the days that followed, Sira began observing Ethan more closely. She saw how he noticed things others overlooked, the way a young warrior's hands shook before battle, the way someone hesitated before striking. He didn't mock them. He didn't judge. He only acknowledged their courage. The Valkora had never seen such attention before. They were trained to fight, to endure, to excel, but they were rarely noticed for who they were. Ethan's presence changed that. Slowly, small smiles appeared during training. Laughter, rare and precious, echoed in the halls. Sira noticed the change, though she would never admit it aloud. One night, Sira returned to the cliff where Ethan often sat. The twin moons reflected on her armor, casting silver light across the jagged rocks. She spoke, her voice barely audible. "Do you ever fear, human?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "But fear is not weakness. It tells us we care. It tells us what is worth protecting." Sira looked away, hiding her thoughts. She could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to her this way. Someone who looked beyond her strength, beyond her title, and saw her. "You make my people soft," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't make anyone anything," Ethan said. "I just remind them what they already are." Sira stayed silent, letting the words settle in the wind. The fortress slept, but she could not. The word he had spoken, beautiful, resonated more and more each day. Not as a compliment, not as a flattery, but as a truth she could feel in her chest. Quiet but undeniable. And somewhere deep inside, she began to understand something she had never known. That true strength was not only in the body, the spear, or the victories. It was in the courage to be seen, to be noticed, and to fight for what you believed was right. For the first time, Commander Sira Veln felt a fragile, unfamiliar warmth, a connection between human and alien, between worlds, and between hearts. A thread of understanding had formed, and it was unbreakable. The calm of Varen Prime did not last long. One morning, alarms rang across the fortress as the distant horizon burned. Smoke twisted into the sky like black snakes, and the sound of approaching warships shook the cliffs. The Drivox, a rival alien race, had come to challenge the Valkora. Their ships were fast, their weapons deadly, and their numbers overwhelming. Commander Sira Veln called the warriors to arms. Every Valkora woman grabbed her spear, adjusted her armor, and prepared for the fight of their lives. Ethan stood among them, bleeding and exhausted, but his heart refused to give in. "This is not your war," Sira said sharply, her eyes locking on him. "It is now," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, full of determination. "If you fall, I fall too." Sira's gaze softened for just a second, then hardened again. She turned to her warriors. "Protect the fortress. Protect each other. Fight!" The battle began with fire raining from the sky. Explosions shook the cliffs, sending debris flying. Ethan moved quickly, carrying wounded warriors to safety, patching broken machines, and helping where he could. He was small, fragile, and human, but he refused to stop. Each act of courage inspired the warriors around him, who had never seen a human act without fear. Sira fought in the heart of the chaos, her spear cutting through enemy ranks with precision. Her movements were deadly yet graceful, her mind always aware of the human fighting beside her. She noticed the way Ethan ran into danger without hesitation, moving between fighters, pulling them out of harm's way. Every time she glanced at him, she felt something unfamiliar, pride, fear, and admiration all at once. A Dravok soldier aimed a powerful beam at the fortress wall. Ethan saw it just in time. Without thinking, he pushed a young Valkora girl out of the way and took the blast himself. Pain ripped through his body, throwing him to the ground. For a heartbeat, everything went dark. Syrah's heart jumped. She rushed to him, fending off enemies with unmatched skill. "Human, stay with me," she shouted, her voice raw with fear. Ethan gasped, blood running down his arm and side. He tried to stand, but his body screamed to rest. I'm okay," he managed to whisper. His hand brushed her arm, a simple human gesture, and yet it carried more meaning than any weapon. "You are foolish," she said fiercely, though her voice trembled. "You risk everything." "And yet I survive," Ethan said with a weak smile. "Because this matters." The battle raged around them, but the humans' courage had a strange effect. The younger warriors, inspired by Ethan's actions, fought with renewed strength. They defended the walls, covered each other, and moved as one. The Dravoks, though fierce, were slowed by the unity of the Valkora. Hours passed. The twin moons rose high in the sky, and the battlefield finally quieted. The Dravoks retreated, leaving the fortress battered but standing. Smoke and fire filled the air, but the Valkora survived. Syrah knelt beside Ethan, checking his injuries. "You risked your life for us," she said, her voice quieter now, almost gentle. He managed a tired laugh. "Guess that makes me one of you now." She shook her head, not speaking for a moment. Then finally she whispered, "You change everything, human. You remind us of things we forgot, things we should never forget." Ethan reached out and touched her hand. It was simple, human, and warm. "I only reminded you," he said softly. For the first time, Syrah allowed herself to feel something deeper than duty or pride. She allowed herself to feel gratitude, and maybe even something closer to hope. The fortress lay in ruins, but a new bond had formed, one forged in fire, courage, and the silent truth of seeing each other clearly. And as the twin moons reflected off the silver cliffs, both human and Valkora warriors knew that the fight had not only tested their strength, but had also revealed something more powerful: the courage to recognize beauty. Even in the heat of war, the battlefield was quiet now. Smoke curled into the sky like thin fingers, and the distant fires of war still glowed faintly across the horizon. The Dravoks had retreated, leaving the fortress of Varen Prime battered but unbroken. The Valkora warriors walked among the ruins, inspecting the damage, tending to their wounded, and grieving for those they had lost. Ethan lay against a broken wall, his body aching, his blood soaking through his torn uniform. Every movement sent waves of pain across his chest and side. Yet his eyes shone with the stubborn spark of life. He had survived, but barely. Commander Syrah Veln knelt beside him, her armor scratched, her hands covered in soot and blood, but her attention focused entirely on the human who had changed everything. She examined his wounds carefully, not as a warrior tending an enemy, but as someone who cared. Her silver eyes, usually cold and impenetrable, softened. "You fool," she said softly, shaking her head. "You risked everything for a battle that was not yours." Ethan smiled weakly. "Maybe it is," he whispered. "Because I fight for what matters. And I fight with people who matter." Syrah looked away, hiding the weight in her chest. Her mind replayed every moment of the battle, the way he had carried the injured, the way he had faced danger without hesitation, the way he had reminded her warriors of something they had forgotten: courage, honor, and, somehow, beauty. For the first time, tears, something no Valkora warrior had shed in centuries, gathered in her eyes. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall, but the human's simple bravery, his strange, unwavering heart, had cracked the armor she wore inside. "You've changed us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You showed us something we forgot, something precious." Ethan reached up, his hand shaking, and touched her arm lightly. "I didn't change you," he said softly. "I just reminded you of who you already were." She looked at him, studying the human who had survived fire, death, and the impossible. In his eyes she saw truth, kindness, and something she had never expected: love without asking for anything in return. The young Valkora warriors gathered nearby, watching silently. Their eyes reflected awe, respect, and gratitude. Ethan's courage had given them hope, a rare and delicate thing in a world forged by war and discipline. Sira finally exhaled, letting herself feel the warmth in her chest. For centuries, her life had been built on strength and victory. But strength alone did not make her people whole. It was compassion, bravery, and the courage to see another being clearly, even a human, that made them truly alive. Ethan's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion overtaking him. Sira held his hand for a long moment, unsure of what to do next. Her warriors had fought fiercely, the fortress had survived, and yet everything felt different. A silent understanding had formed, a bond between human and alien. Fragile and extraordinary, she whispered again. The word he had spoken the first time they met. The word that had changed her. Beautiful. And this time it was not just a word. It was a recognition, a promise, and a truth. The fortress slowly returned to its rhythm. Warriors cleaned their weapons, repaired walls, and tended the injured. But Ethan remained at the center of their attention. Not because he was human, not because he had fought bravely, but because he had reminded them of something deeper, the courage to be seen, the willingness to stand for what is right, and the quiet beauty that exists even in the harshest battles. Sira stayed beside him until he fell into a deep sleep, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion. She watched the twin moons reflect on the silver cliffs, letting the quiet night wash over them. In the silence, she understood something she could not say aloud. Humans were fragile, yes, but their hearts, brave, honest, and kind, were powerful in ways no weapon could match. And for the first time in her long life, Sira Veln realized that seeing beauty in another being, truly seeing them, was stronger than any army, sharper than any spear, and more enduring than any war. The night held its breath as the fortress rested, and two worlds separated by distance, species, and history began to understand each other through courage, honesty, and the fragile, enduring light of humanity. Months had passed since the battle on Varen Prime. The fortress had been repaired, walls reforged, and the warriors trained harder than ever. Yet something had changed inside the hearts of the Valkora. They fought with the same strength, moved with the same precision, but now there was a spark, a subtle warmth that had never been there before. Ethan Ward's presence had left an imprint deeper than any weapon ever could. He had returned to Earth months ago, his injuries healed, but the memory of the fortress, the warriors, and the strange connection he had shared with Commander Sira Veln stayed with him every moment. Yet the Valkora had not forgotten him either. In the center of the fortress, under the twin moons, a statue had been carved from silver stone. It depicted a human man standing tall, his face calm, one hand lifted toward the sky as if reaching for something beyond. The young warriors gathered around it in quiet reverence, learning the story of courage, honor, and the strange human who had seen their hearts. Sira stood before the statue, her armor shining softly in the moonlight. She remembered every word he had spoken, every action he had taken. She remembered the moment he had called her beautiful, the way her heart had skipped, and how that word had opened a part of her she never knew existed. It was not vanity, not pride, but recognition. Recognition that courage, honor, and heart were as beautiful as strength itself. A young warrior approached her. "Commander," she asked, her voice hesitant, "why does the statue honor a human?" Sira looked down at the figure, then up at the moons. He was small, fragile by our standards, but his heart, it was larger than any of us. He reminded us that true strength is more than weapons or victories. True strength is in seeing, understanding, and valuing what others cannot see. The young warrior's eyes widened. She bowed slightly. "I hope I can fight like him one day." "You already can," Sira said quietly. "You just need to remember that courage and beauty can exist together." Later that night, Sira walked along the cliff where she had first watched Ethan under the twin moons. She breathed in the cold wind, remembering his voice, his smile, the way he had looked at her and her people as though nothing in the universe was too small to notice. She whispered the word he had spoken months ago, letting it roll across her tongue. Beautiful. And this time she understood completely. It was not a word of fragility or softness. It was a word of truth, of recognition, of bravery and heart. To see beauty in another being, in their courage and spirit, was the greatest strength of all. Her warriors trained below, laughing softly, sparring with more care than ever. They were strong, but their hearts had grown lighter. Ethan's lesson had changed them in a way no weapon could. And somewhere across the vastness of space, the human who had given them this gift looked up at the stars and remembered them too. Sira turned back to the statue, her silver eyes reflecting the moons. "He showed us what we forgot," she murmured. "He showed us that even the smallest and most fragile life can teach the greatest lesson, that true beauty is courage, kindness, and the willingness to see others clearly." The fortress slept under the twin moons. The battle scars would fade, but the memory of Ethan Ward and his words would remain forever, and in the hearts of the Valcora warriors. From the youngest recruit to Commander Sira herself, one truth now burned brighter than any war. That strength is admirable. Courage is respected, but the human heart, honest, brave, and full of wonder, is truly beautiful. And so, under the light of distant stars, the tale of the human who saw beauty in alien warriors became legend, a story whispered across worlds, reminding every soul